At some point, usefulness replaced wholeness. Not intentionally, not maliciously. It just happened. You learned early that being needed mattered more than being understood, that reliability earned more respect than honesty, that competence was safer than curiosity. So you became useful. You solved problems. You carried weight. You showed up. And people noticed, but mostly for what you could provide. Years later, you might still be functioning well, responsible, capable, trusted. Yet something feels thin, not broken, not painful, just unfinished. As if the version of you that asked deeper questions never had the space to fully form. This isn't failure. It's what happens when a man is shaped by demand before he's allowed to know himself. And once you see it, you realize usefulness didn't just organize your work. It quietly organized your identity. As an adult, this doesn't show up as crisis. It shows up as competence. At work, you become the one people rely on when something breaks. Not because you're inspired, but because you're steady. You don't ask for much. You don't disrupt momentum. You fill the gaps others leave. And slowly, without discussion, your role hardens. You're no longer seen as someone with depth. You're seen as someone who handles things. In relationships, the same pattern repeats. You're the stabilizer, the listener, the one who absorbs stress without externalizing it. People trust you, but they don't necessarily see you. Your needs feel optional. Your interior life feels excessive to explain, so you don't. Over time, you start relating to yourself the same way. You measure your worth by output, by usefulness, by how little friction you create. You become reliable to the point of invisibility. And the cost isn't exhaustion. It's distortion. You begin to experience yourself as a function instead of a person. This is not new. It happened to Marcus Vipsanius Agrippa, the man who built Rome's power while standing permanently in its shadow. Agrippa was indispensable. He won battles Augustus could not, designed infrastructure that held the empire together, solved problems no one else could manage. And because he never failed, he was never centered. History remembers Augustus as the face of Rome, Agrippa as the tool. Not because Agrippa lacked depth, but because usefulness swallowed his identity. He was needed before he was understood. And that's the pattern. When a man becomes useful early, the world reinforces that role. It rewards function. It depends on reliability. And it quietly discourages introspection. Because introspection doesn't keep things running. Usefulness does. And once usefulness becomes the core of who you are, everything else gets postponed. Not denied, but postponed. Over time, desire thins. Not because you stop wanting things, but because wanting starts to feel impractical. Desire asks questions. It disrupts efficiency. It introduces uncertainty. And you've learned that uncertainty creates friction. So you narrow your wants to what fits inside your role. What can be justified? What can be explained? What won't inconvenience the system that relies on you? Gradually, judgment changes too. Not in what you choose, but in how you choose. You begin selecting options that preserve usefulness over those that expand you. Not because they're better, but because they're safer. You trust decisions that keep you needed. You hesitate around decisions that might cost you relevance. And self-trust erodes quietly, not through failure, through repetition. You stop asking what feels true and start asking what will work. You stop listening inward and start scanning outward for demand. Eventually, you notice something subtle. When no one needs you, you don't know what to do with yourself. Not because you're incapable, but because your internal compass was never fully calibrated. It was outsourced early. Usefulness trained you to look outward for validation, for cues, for permission. And the longer that pattern holds, the harder it becomes to distinguish between what you want and what you're simply good at providing. Eventually, you notice something else. You're good at many things, but you don't feel inside any of them. You've learned how to respond, how to perform, how to be depended on. But dependence is not the same as knowing yourself. Usefulness gave you structure early. It gave you safety. It gave you a place. But it also postpones something essential. The part of you that chooses without justification. The part that wants without needing permission. The part that exists even when no one is asking for anything. That part didn't disappear. It waited. And waiting has a cost. Because when a man is formed by demand before he is formed inwardly, he may spend years mistaking usefulness for identity. This isn't something to fix quickly, or solve, or optimize. It's something to notice. To recognize the difference between being needed and being whole. Because usefulness will always find a place in the world, but wholeness has to be claimed when no one is asking for it. And until that moment arrives, a man can be admired, relied upon, even respected, while still feeling unfinished.